Do you ever feel like you don't quite fit in? Have you been described as the black sheep of your family? Well, if that's the case, you are not alone. So many of us, myself included, are in a circumstance where we see the world, we see ourselves, we see the way that we fit into it differently than the people around us. And that can cause all sorts of strife and consternation as we try and find our way in the world. Today, I have an amazing conversation with my friend Kris Ferraro as we talk about what it's like to move to the beat of a different drummer and how we can do that in a healthy, authentic way. This is Monterastelli, and welcome to the Tapping Q&A podcast recorded live to tape from Williamsburg in Brooklyn. This is episode 579, originally aired October 1st, 2023. Hi, everyone. I hope this finds you well wherever you are and whatever time of day you're in. I'm glad you're spending a little time with me today. Today, we're going to have a conversation about what it's like to be different and how we navigate the world and how we can do that in a healthy way. To help us to understand what it's like to move to our own rhythm, I have a great conversation today with my friend Kris Ferraro. She has just released a book called Your Difference is Your Strength. And in the conversation, we explore what it is like walking to the beat of a different drummer and how we can deal with feeling like we're on the outside. And most importantly, once we recognize who we are and how we can do that authentically, how we can live lives that we love. So without further ado, here is my conversation with Kris.
So one of the things that I always love, just kind of whenever someone has spent a huge amount of time creating a book, kind of figuring out why. Years ago, I had a friend of mine who was getting a doctoral thesis, and his advisor said, "Can you live with the topic for the next 5 years?" And so to be in a place where you're going to invest as much time and energy as I know you have in this, what was the reason why this was the story or the information or the thing that you needed to share next?
I think it was something that's always been with me that coalesced about 8 or 9 years ago into an actual topic that I wanted to speak with people on. Mm-hmm. And it was coming into a place of being born and feeling different from everyone else around me. And a lot of those differences were internal. Later on, there were external, obvious things that made me different, that made me a misfit. But it was in that path where I felt like I did what a lot of people do, is I tried to figure out how I could turn around this life thing and make it work for me so that I wasn't always from the outside looking in. Mm-hmm. And so as a book person, books were my friends. I turned to research. So I started reading lots of biographies of people that I admired and people that I didn't, to figure out who they were and how they got to where they became what they became when all of us became aware of them. And in the research of that, I had made some assumptions that they were born into very loving, stable homes, that they were given everything that they needed, that there was financial support, that they were universally beloved by everyone that they encountered, only to find that that was not the case, that many of them, their early beginnings were resembling mine. And I thought, wow, this is really interesting. These people have also struggled in a lot of the same ways that I'm struggling, and somehow they were able to become who they came here to be. And that became the misfit to trailblazer journey. Somebody who starts out not fitting in, not being a part of the status quo, and at some point is able to go in the direction that their inner urgings are telling them to, and at some point become universally beloved and accepted, or at least advance some form of civilization forward with whatever their genre is. And so in paying attention to that, I thought, well, maybe all trailblazers start out as misfits. Maybe that's the way that it is supposed to be. And we've all been looking at it from a skewed perspective. And so it was an opportunity for me to embrace my weirdo self in every way and to embrace all the weirdos around me, and also help to develop a path of empowerment to become who I came here to be, and now to be able to help other people do the same.
And so what were some of those kind of like characteristics that you were bumping into that were showing up over and over and over again in those people's lives as you were poking around their histories?
There was always some sort of early adversity. So either there was a broken home, they were born into a traumatic situation, they were born during a war, they were born during great, great adversity. They often had childhood illness. Learning disabilities were really well were well documented at the time that those things were known, and we're knowing more and more about those in modern life as the time goes on. So a lot of it was just ascribed to that person's weird. They don't look the same way. They don't think the same way. They don't act the same way. We now have terminology for a lot of that stuff. And they also look different. And they were often ostracized. They were often ostracized or ridiculed in some kind of way that other people identified them as different in some kind of way that felt offensive.
And it's so interesting, even for folks who are not iconoclastic, but just the people I work with pretty regularly in my client space, like how often othering becomes part of the developmental process. And it's so rooted in like this idea that, on a subconscious level, we just want to be a part of the tribe, because if we're pushed out of the tribe, we die. And in many cases, the way I feel safe is by drawing attention to the person who is different than me. So everybody looks at the person who is different than me, so they don't have to actually be looking at me in that particular way. And sometimes it's an internal sense of uncomfortableness about the difference. And sometimes it's an internalness that is uncomfortable about myself. And so what's a target that I can push out there so it's easy for folks to be able to gravitate to in that particular way? So I become safe inside of that.
The scapegoat has many advantages for everyone but the scapegoat.
Yeah.
It is a focus, it's an area of projection, it's a target, right? That person becomes all of those things. But you're right. Then there's a sense of safety amongst everyone else. There's a sense of camaraderie amongst everyone else. So it brings those people together. And at the same time, there are things that those of us that are misfits do that project out to other people that can make other people feel uncomfortable. So it's not completely like there's an innocent victim here. It's all part of a pattern that becomes created.
And so then inside of that pattern, so the people who become these trailblazers have these experiences. So it might be possible to then conclude that in some way those experiences help to galvanize people in that particular way. So then that path, how does that path then become a useful thing, or maybe not even useful, but kind of like the fuel or the mitigating factor that created these lifestyles? Like were you able to figure out a connection between, hey, these are common experiences, therefore it does this thing in the path?
There is a trajectory that happens, and I call it the misfit hero's journey. So a lot of us are familiar with the hero's journey, where the hero to be leaves a familiar setting, home where they live, family. They go out into the wilds of unfamiliar circumstances. They encounter challenges and adversity. They learn something really important, and then they bring that back to their home. And so misfits do something similar, where they start out being ostracized. They try to do everything in their power to be loved and accepted, because love is our most common need. And the need for love can make us make a lot of mistakes, make a lot of choices, because we're trying to fulfill that need within us. And so out of that, they're trying to get other people to accept and love them, and they have to be different to be able to do that. And it either doesn't work at all, or it works and it's incredibly unsatisfying, because what those people have come to accept is a mask, a facade, a performance, rather than the real legitimate you. And so even when you're able to sort of fake it till you make it and get that acceptance, it doesn't pay off the way that you think it is going to. And then at some point, out of that dissatisfaction or out of the failure of that, There can be a rebelliousness that comes in that says, I'm not going to do this anymore. I'm just going to accept myself for who I am. And in the exploration of that, they often have a mission. They often have something that they feel really passionately about that drives them forward. That passion is something that they invest all of their energy in. It's the reason why they get up in the morning. And as they invest in that passion, that too is often ridiculed by the people around because it does not match with the prevailing norms of the time. And so, but that passion within them, that self-led process, is so intoxicating, you can't help but do it. And so in the act of doing that, they embrace more and more of themselves. And then the irony is that the love and acceptance that they've always been wanting is now on the other side of their true authentic nature. And now it's coming from a place that's really satisfying, and they're able to offer something to their group, their humanity, their genre of music, whatever it may be, that then pays off because now they're benefiting everyone. And it takes the misfit to be able to do that because the followers, the status quo is not going to push against prevailing norms. They're not going to risk themselves. They're not going to put themselves out on the growing edge. The misfit's very comfortable with doing that because that's where they live. And so the misfit who sees differently, who interprets information differently, who corresponds with life in a completely different way, is able to birth through them new ideas, new ways of being, new artistry, new solutions that then benefit the whole.
And as you say that, and in a small way, I think of one night I had laying in bed when I was in 8th grade. As I was laying there, I saw through the entire matrix of the social structure of all of the cliques at my school and how they fit together, and realized like I had two options. I could play the game and fit in, or I could be myself and constantly be on the outside of it, and chose the second. And also recognized in doing that it also was going to create a lot of pain that goes along with it. So it wasn't just this like, hey, I see this thing in an authentic, different way. I'm going to go do this thing, and boy, isn't it going to be great. It was actually kind of like, I'm either choosing between being authentic and being on the outside, or being inauthentic and being on the inside. And both of those had pros and cons to that. And I chose whatever I chose. And I don't even know if it was the right choice. But it's like, I think it's important as we're having this conversation to recognize that as easy it is for us in hindsight to valorize the path of the misfit and what is created because they're doing these obstacles, from the inside out, it doesn't necessarily mean that's easy. And I think that's just important to say, because I've talked with lots of people who are like, I'm following my passion and my authentic self. Why is this so painful at the exact same time? I thought simply follow your bliss and everything falls into place. And so I think it's good that you're talking about how it comes from this very particular drive, and there's a consequence to doing something that is countercultural, going against the grain, even if we know it's the right fit for us in that particular setting.
Oh, 100%. That's so important for people to know. That's why I'm a tapper. That's why I've been a tapper for 20 years. That's why I've had a practice for 15 years. I had to find tools that enabled me to do this in a really empowered way. The road less traveled is always going to be fraught, right? There's debris on the road less traveled, right? You're cutting a, swash as you go through. You're charting your own territory. And yet, there's at times we have to make a choice between an easy life or a rich one. And I think you and I have both chosen richness. And for me, I really have no regrets about that, because it enabled me to connect with people in such a profoundly deep way. It's what enables me to connect with so many different kinds of clients and students, now thousands in, to be able to meet them wherever they are. Because from me not being accepted, I know how to accept people. I know how to meet them where they are. And yeah, it is incredibly painful. And it's what we look at when we see the overnight sensation. There is no overnight sensation. Everything we think of as an overnight sensation. Every person has 10, 20 years behind them of slugging along, really practicing their craft, really making difficult choices, sometimes going without, sometimes being in poverty. And because they believed enough in themselves, but that belief wavers, right? And so this is where tapping can come in to aid this journey.
And I also think inside of that, as it's wavering, there are times, at least I know, I've simply chosen to pass. And what I mean by that is just take the easy road and just fit in, because for the course of the next 2 hours, for the course of the next week, for the course of some particular setting, have made the cost benefit analysis that it's okay if I just nod and smile in the midst of some of this, even though it's not authentic for me, even in trying in an overarching way to kind of embrace that authenticity. And I think it's good to say out loud and give people permission to, not have to be the bold countercultural person every moment of their life if that doesn't feel comfortable and safe.
Well, we absolutely put on different roles in different environments. You're probably not going to be your most authentic self at your job, depending on what kind of job you have. But you and I both developed careers in which we can be exactly that, right? But before that, I had to do all sorts of things to go along with the course of what was happening within the agency I worked for, the company that I worked for. So absolutely, it's important to be self-protective and to recognize that not all behavior is appropriate in all settings, and that some places aren't the safe place to be your true authentic self. And yet there are people that I know who are unapologetically them, no matter where they are, online at the bank, sitting at Christmas dinner with their family. They are so just them. And that's not me, because I'm always so conscious of other people's comfort in every setting that I'm in. And there are times that I adapt myself and my behavior to help other people to feel safe and comfortable. But those people who are so unapologetically themselves live with absolute freedom. And so I think at least it's something to aspire to.
And so then as we're navigating this, because, as we come to awareness and how do I navigate as someone who might be moving to a different beat, how are the ways that you use tapping in that particular journey as you're navigating that?
Well, one of the important things was going through the past. It was looking at those specific events when I was ridiculed or not invited to the birthday party. A lot of Misfits have a whole catalog of those. So going through some of those and neutralizing them are really, really important. But for me, tapping has been most beneficial in enabling me to take risks. So tapping on an experience that I'm about to do that terrifies me, that I am catastrophizing in my own mind. My monkey mind is on full alert. It's creating every bad scenario that could possibly happen. Using tapping to neutralize some of that catastrophizing and to look at all the worst case scenarios that can happen. And also using tapping to calm the nervous system down, to calm down nervousness, anxiety, and worry, which were a huge part of my life for decades, so that I can step out onto that growing edge, say the unpopular thing, speak up when I need to speak up, defend someone when someone needs to be defended. None of those things are easy. Nobody likes having uncomfortable conversations. Me personally, I did not come into this life to be a hero, but yet I find myself in situations where I'm the only person that's going to say something, and I do. And so tapping on things before I do them has really, really been beneficial. Tapping on the critical ideas about my own creative journey. So, being a writer is not easy. Being an author and putting stuff out into print is not easy. This new book is extremely vulnerable for me. There's a lot of sharing in there that I even showed to a couple of friends, and they're like, I don't even know these stories about you, and you're putting them in a book that's going to go out to all of these people. But that inner calling that said, you must be vulnerable. You must be naked in this moment. You must lay it bare so that people know the passion that you have for allowing others to rise up as you have risen up. To be able to do that, I had to tap through a lot of different aspects of it. I also used it to recall memories. So I did a lot of tapping to recall memories in more vivid detail. There's a story that I share in the beginning of the book called The Last Picked. And I was in the process of writing the book, and that memory came in like a download. The whole story was there. I hadn't thought about it. I mean, it was something that happened in third grade. That was a long time ago. So I haven't thought about that in a really long time. But when it came back in, I wanted to recall all of the vivid details that were there. And so tapping through that memory not only neutralized some of the pain from that experience, but it also brought it into high def. So I was able to see faces. I was able to see myself in a more adult, grown-up way, rather than being from the perspective of that 8-year-old girl. So tapping really helped with that.
And one of the things I find like so interesting as you're talking about this kind of like looking as we go forward to find what is behind, I appreciate the desire for us to find past memories and clear them out, because they're the things that teach us about the world. And I also find that if I'm just looking backwards, I can remember bad things, but it doesn't necessarily mean that is the bad thing that taught me a lesson of some sort about the world. And when we're looking forward and we're like, I would like to say this thing, act in this way, show up in the world in this way, then all of those things in my subconscious mind that want me to be safe go, oh, but what about this? And hey, remember this and that sort of stuff. And so I'm not just tapping on the things that are gross behind me. The place I want to go, it's saying, hey, this is the specific thing that is in the way of you right now. And so it gives us the ability to, like, I don't want to just tap on the past for the sake of tapping on the past. I'm sure there is some difference to it, but in some ways it's, it's kind of like if I spent a bunch of time today cleaning out the drawer in which I have my dish towels in. Like, I could make that drawer more organized, and that's not going to impact my life in any material way at all, because I'm just grabbing the top one off the top anyways, and it doesn't matter if it's organized or not. But if I'm looking forward, I see the thing that is directly in front of what I would like to change. And then when it starts uncovering that stuff, it makes it so much easier. So I really love this idea of like thinking in terms of how are the ways that I want to think, feel, and believe and act to articulate who I think is authentic me myself, and then paying attention to the feelings of resistance, the walls that show up, the tail enders that show up in our head, that gives us the opportunity to be tapping on, at least in my mind, what feels like the most useful thing to move forward in the way that you're talking about.
Well, it certainly makes us more courageous. And I was someone who was a spoken word poet, and I stopped doing it because of the severe anxiety that I would go through a week before a performance. And then 2 days following the performance, I thought 9 days of my life being gripped by anxiety, this isn't worth it. But it was something that I really, really loved. And so when I got more integrated into this field and started getting offers to speak, this was not something that I was interested in doing. I'm an author for a reason. I get to hide behind my words. You don't see me. It's a very comfortable place for me to be. Writing was something I found when I was 8 years old that helped me to take all of these big, uncomfortable, and scary feelings that I had and had a place for them to now go. So it really has been my oldest healing tool in many ways. But speaking, not so much. And yet the call of my spirit was saying, yes, you are going to do this, and you're going to do it, and you have to do it, and that this is part of your mission. And I can be obedient at times to the calling of my spirit, and at other times, not so much. And this was one of those cases where I had to tap for about an hour before I would get on stage to be able to speak. And I would be crying, and I would show up on stage and my eyes would be all puffy and my face would be all red. It was like not a good look for public speaking. And yet what happened was it gave way to the next talk, to the next talk, to the next talk, to now I absolutely love doing public speaking. It's such a fulfilling part of my career, which I could not have anticipated. And it's something that I can't wait to get up there. I can't wait to get up there and express who I am in that way. It's a very unique form of being able to express what you have when you have a mission. And so if I had not had tapping, I would not have been able to do that because I healed my way through becoming someone who speaks. And now I love it and look forward to it. And it would not have happened without tapping.
And the thing I love inside of that is, and I think it's a easy pit for us to fall into, is what you're describing is a process of growing into a skill or an asset or a disposition or a way of being. Like one of my things that I'm most appreciative about, now being in the tapping community for over a decade and a half, is how little time we spend now talking about 1 minute and 1 session miracles. Like I'm 100% open to the possibility that spontaneous healing is within our grasp. And I also think that like it's sometimes healthier for us as we are stepping into a place that didn't feel safe before to give ourselves the ability to make sure that we're not over traumatizing ourselves by like, I just got to push myself out there and I got to do the really hard thing. Like, yes, I want to do the thing that feels authentic, but I also want to do the thing that is authentic in a way that is practically and emotionally safe for me. And making sure that like, I'm great stretching, I'm not so great stretching. Because like it's possible that I can stretch the rubber band so far that it can't, like we break the elasticity and it can't bounce back. And I'm looking for like long-term sustainable healing and transformation. Yes. And so I love the way that you described, the evolution of being able to share in this particular venue versus the written way was something that we grow into. And all of the skills and assets, like I'm sure as you looked at the histories of these folks, they didn't go from, I have no clarity to I have absolute clarity to the thing I want to say in the world. It becomes like we're evolving in real time as we learn our authentic, well, at least I am revolving in real time to find my authentic self. I'm yet to have the moment where the angels trumpeted and the clouds part and a beam of light came down and told me what my schedule is going to be for the next 9.5 days. Like I've never had that moment. It's kind of like revealing in this way. And so I love you're talking about, I need to tap a little bit so this feels a little safer, which really just becomes this micro experiment in authenticity. And in that micro experiment, I get to learn, is this actually my authentic self or is this the projection I have of my authentic self? And I get to try again and I get to try again. And so the fact that it's a natural unfolding process is something that I love about your approach with all of this.
All of this is so important. I think it is human nature to want instantaneous results. I think we live in a common world now where instant gratification is something that is met, right? And at the same time, nothing has been freer for me than embracing the journey versus focusing on the destination. Because the tapping enabled me to get out on the stage. You don't learn about being a speaker by watching videos about being a speaker. You learn by standing on stage and speaking. And we have to get okay with being mediocre. We have to get okay with failing. We have to get okay with not being extraordinary when we start doing something. And tapping can enable us to do that, to know, okay, that talk didn't go over so well. And I have this tool that I can use when I get off stage to bring down any embarrassment, to bring down any shame, to bring down the projection that everyone is thinking about what I said when I was up there, right? The mind is ridiculous. It fills in all these blanks and creates fantasies and stories all the time. And tapping is one of those ways to neutralize it. So if you know that you have a skill set that's going to alleviate any pain that you may experience from having an experience, you'll be more likely to do it. But we learn in the act of doing. We learn to be safer in relationship with other people by being safer in relationship with other people. And I was somebody, I think, who practiced a lot because it was too scary. to be on that stage, to be in that relationship. And so I was always researching and trying to figure out and working on the machinations and analyzing. It's in the doing that the real growth happens. People don't become actors by not acting, right? They start in community theater, right? Or in a play in school, and they work their way up. And so I am no longer, I'm so happy to say, one of those people that's waiting for that completion, because I know that our souls are here for growth. I firmly believe that our souls are perfect and that they've never been hurt or harmed and injured in any way. And yet they are housed in these finite, highly flawed beings. And if we're here in a body, we're here for a reason. And in the reasoning of that is the growth that comes with stumbling and falling sometimes and picking ourselves back up. And that is where we get courage from. It's in the act of doing, and tapping enables us to be able to do that.
Well, as someone who was fortunate enough to get a sneak peek of the book, and got a chance to dive in early, the thing I love about it is, and this is just so it is very personal and very tangible, but it's also systematic and step by step. And so if someone is in a circumstance where they're like, okay, I recognize the fact that I don't fit in quite the way that I thought, I think this is such a lovely, gentle set of tools and approaches to walk someone through that process. So, I am appreciative, and I know lots of other folks will be appreciative that you took the time to craft it in this particular way.
It really is a love letter. It's a love letter to everyone who's ever felt left out. That's what it's for. I know the sting of that experience, and yet I've never been happier. And I've never been happier to be my weird self and to do what I'm doing in the way that I'm doing it. It's only maybe it's the hindsight of midlife. Maybe that's part of it, of being able to look back over my highly examined life to see that all of those things and all of that adversity came together, coalesced in this way to bring me to exactly where I am right now, in a life that is so rich and so full and so beautiful, far happier than I ever thought that I could ever be. And I listened to that still small voice within that said I could be. And following that is part of the revealing of this journey. And so being able to share that with other people, to say, there's so much love here for you. There's so much good here for you. You have worth, you have value, and you, in your own unique self, can provide only what you are able to provide. And if you don't do it, the world misses out on it. There's a system that's far loftier than what I could ever encounter, of consciousness, where all of us are made in our own, in the image and the likeness of the one, where we all come together and we can fit together in a state of belonging, where all of us get to be who we are and contribute what we came here to contribute. And if you want a cure for depression, that's it. That's it. Taking up the space in the universe that you were designed for will dispel that instantaneously. And that it's possible for us all to be doing that, for all of it to be working together for the common good. And as we're looking at the things that we're looking at in our life, the challenges that our modern life is facing, it's going to be the misfit trailblazers that are going to do it. We're going to be the ones that are going to see the solution, that are going to be able to bring something through that needs to be brought out into the world in a really significant way, that's going to honor all of humanity, that's going to make a world that works for everyone. And a lot of misfits have that within them. There's a strong sense of compassion for the suffering of others. Well, then who better to birth solutions that can alleviate the suffering of others? We know what that is because we've been in it. And so this is so much more than just a book for me. I want to start a revolution of radical self-love and self-acceptance, a revolution of people that are standing up for who they are, and in doing so, benefit everyone else. Like, how incredible is that you get to honor who you really are, and at the same time, you're serving life and what you came here to be. So that's what I'm hoping that this book will do. And I really appreciate you giving me the opportunity to come here and talk about it, because
Yep, of course.
I feel
Well,
so
Kris,
about it.
thanks for the amazing book, and thanks for your time today.
Thank you so much.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Kris as much as I did. If you'd like to dive deeper, I would really encourage you to check out Kris's latest book. I got a chance to read it ahead of time. It is absolutely wonderful. Everywhere good books are sold, all you need to do is ask for Your Difference is Your Strength. I've included a link to that in the show notes so you can track that down. And if you would like to go deeper and find tools that make it even easier for you to be comfortable inside of your own skin, all you need to do is click the video that's on the screen right now. It will lead you to a playlist of some amazing tools that are going to help you to be comfortable inside of your own skin and live as you want to live.